class. My name is Mario Anthony Caceres, and my main claim is that human activity is the primarily responsible for global climate change. My supporting claims would be that the second industrial revolution is what began what is now known as the modern temperature trend, and my second claim would come out to be the human products of greenhouse gases increases the heat levels of the Earth. And so, to begin, global climate change is basically the process in which the rays of the heat of the sun gets absorbed by greenhouse gases that basically hang out up in the atmosphere, and it basically gets re-emitted down into the Earth's surface, causing the Earth to get a little bit warmer through time. Some examples of greenhouse gases would basically be water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and chlorofluorocarbons. Each of these can be directly related towards us in many ways. According to the EPA, electricity, transportation, the industry of production, commercial and residential buildings, and as well as agriculture are some of the causes of the emission of greenhouse gases. To begin, on my supporting claim, my first supporting claim, the second industrial revolution began as what we know as the modern temperature trend. It's no secret that our planet had been changing over time, even before we had been documenting it, from the obvious changes of the ice sheets in Antarctica to basically the blazing hot heat of the Mesozoic era. But it wasn't until the early 19th century where scientists actually started measuring the amount of carbon dioxide and all the greenhouse gases that might be being trapped up there. And once the Industrial Revolution actually began, a lot of the processes in which the materials were being made and a lot of the production was based off of energy and power and basically the burning of fossil fuels, and that's when everything started coming together for humanity as well. Basically, some of the key points during the Industrial Revolution, especially with materials, would be Bessemer steel, concrete, and electricity. They basically paved the way towards a newer and more efficient way of living, but the process of construction and production came at that price. Through the burning of fossil fuels such as coal and petroleum, it basically produces carbon dioxide, which is what's flooding most of our atmosphere and basically causing the heat to stay trapped up there and sort of be emitted back down. During the early mid-20th centuries, it was easy to understand that production could not stop during times of war, since we had both World War I and World War II basically going in action. Lots of arms and ammunition, and many vehicles needed to be produced, and there was no other way other than to produce them the way that we already knew how to produce them with, and that was basically through the production of each of those materials. Along with the production, the electricity that was needed and the petroleum to basically fuel these machines were basically one of the bigger factors as well that contributed to the emission of each of these gases. Going on to my second claim, human products and greenhouse gases increases the heat levels of Earth. Today's technologies have conditioned humans to the point where the simple use of television does not seem like a big idea. In our current time, we are currently surrounded with and consumed by our everyday products such as cars, phones, and our coveted electronic devices. Even our homes become a producer, and new advancements coming from all directions without a sense of cause and effect. The direction of climate can only turn in one direction. Though our fossil fuels are depleting, there are no signs of ceasing in production and only a want for more. We can compare this to the water crisis happening in California. We are getting to the point where we don't have much, and it's becoming very scarce, and now people are being punished over it. But I believe the only thing that we can do now is actually educate people on what's happening in the world and how we can change production and different sources of renewable energy. As you can see, that our summers have become springs, and our autumns have sort of become as hot as summers now. And that's due to the fact that we aren't really controlling our usage of electronic devices, or even like our control over emission over cars and automobiles and such. But basically, to conclude, it's evident that global climate change is primarily caused by human activity with the start of the industrialized world, which only knew of advancement, and is obvious by reports of emission that it was the case. Through an early start and proper education and awareness, things may change with all likelihood. The future is still doubtful.
All right, well, the proposition is clearly identified, so that part is fine. You need to explain why there is dispute on this particular issue. Why are we hearing this argument? You basically give an explanation of what the theory of greenhouse gases is. You present the theory behind this and an explanation about how it works. I'm not sure why there's an argument about these particular issues. Is there a dispute about how significant it is, about whether or not something else is contributing to it, how important human activity is on this? I've got no context for why we're having an argument on this particular point, and I think you need something like that at the beginning of the speech. You do preview what the secondary points are, which is fine, but when you get started, instead of going to the first point, you really that's when you start to give some more background explaining the theory, and you actually have a second signpost of your first point later on in the speech. The fossil fuel theory is explained, but it's mostly asserted. I didn't hear any source citations on this. In fact, the only source citation I heard during the presentation was the EPA, and I heard that once in the argument. So you definitely need to make sure that you are presenting your evidence with a source, and I'm not hearing that in the oral part of the presentation. The second point that you have seems to be going off on tangents concerning whether or not we have sufficient fuel to continue to function the way we are, and not really talking about CO2 emissions or the global warming stuff. So suddenly we've gone from something bad is happening with climate to we're going to run out of energy and we're acting as if we aren't. I'm going, well, that's a good thing. If we run out of energy, then we'll stop screwing up the climate, apparently. I'm not exactly sure that that's the inference that you want to be making, but it might be the inference that I would make having heard your speech. So I think you need to make that point connect more effectively to the first point. This is not a subject that's hard to find information on. There's just a lot of data out there that talks about what the level of CO2 is. There are theories that make projections about what the increase in the temperature is going to be, long-term ideas about what the consequence would be to the environment, and we need to have some of that information in the speech, because that's the thing that connects the theory to these harms that you're going to be warning us about. We got to have something that connects them. All I get is the explanation of the theory without the proof. We think this is what's going on. Well, why do you think that that's true? What's the grounds for believing that? And I think that's the problem with the speech on the first point. On the second point, it just feels like you kind of shifted directions in the argument and you went in another tangent there, so you want to be careful about that. All right, thank you.